Scott Bessent, the Treasury Secretary under President Donald Trump, proposed the implementation of universal tariffs on U.S. imports, starting at 2.5%, with the rate increasing by the same amount every month. This gradual escalation could eventually reach as high as 20%. The goal behind this approach is to give businesses and countries sufficient time to adapt and negotiate better trade agreements. However, President Trump has expressed interest in even higher tariffs. He mentioned plans to impose tariffs on imported computer chips, semiconductors, and pharmaceuticals, criticizing existing subsidies. Trump believes that steeper tariffs would reduce imports and boost domestic manufacturing, with rates expected to be significantly higher than the initial 2.5%. Since taking office on January 20, 2025, President Trump has quickly rolled out a series of tariffs targeting key U.S. trading partners, particularly Canada, Mexico, and China. These tariffs are part of a broader strategy to address issues like illegal immigration, drug trafficking, and trade imbalances. On his inauguration day, Trump imposed a 25% tariff on all imports from Canada and Mexico, and in a speech on January 30th, he confirmed that this tariff would go into effect on Saturday. Additionally, he's considering including oil imports from these countries in the tariff, assessing whether the prices are fair. This move aims to address illegal immigration and fentanyl-related chemical smuggling. Canada has strongly opposed these tariffs. Prime Minister Justin Trudeau has warned of retaliatory tariffs on U.S. goods if the U.S. moves forward with its measures. These countermeasures will be designed to ensure that no single Canadian region bears an unfair burden. Ontario Premier Doug Ford has even proposed halting electricity exports to U.S. states like Michigan, New York, and Minnesota as retaliation, leveraging Canada's significant role in power supplies to these areas. A recent KPMG survey found that 81% of Canadian business leaders are willing to weather short-term challenges posed by retaliatory tariffs if it secures a fair trade agreement that protects Canada's economy and sovereignty. In response to these tariff threats, Trump remarked that the U.S. doesn't need Canada, suggesting that the country doesn't need Canadian cars, lumber, oil, or gas. He also criticized Canada's military reliance on the U.S., even joking that Canada could become the 51st U.S. state to eliminate trade deficits and avoid tariffs. Trudeau has stated that all options remain on the table in response to these tariffs, signaling that energy export measures may be part of Canada's strategy. However, internal divisions within Canada remain about this approach. In addition to countering U.S. tariffs, Canada is actively collaborating with international partners like the European Union, Denmark, and Mexico to develop a united response. Canadian Foreign Minister Melanie Joly has announced plans to engage with her counterparts in the UK, Mexico, and the EU to create a coordinated strategy. She emphasized the importance of a united front against these tariffs, noting that discussions are already underway in Europe about potential retaliation. Mexican President Claudia Sheinbaum also criticized Trump's tariffs, arguing that they wouldn't effectively tackle issues like immigration and drug trafficking. She stressed the need for cooperation between the U.S. and Mexico to address these complex challenges, and warned that the tariffs could harm diplomatic relations. Beyond North America, Trump is also seeking to impose an additional 10% tariff on all imports from China, citing China's role in fentanyl distribution, which contributes to the U.S. drug crisis. This tariff is expected to take effect on February 1, 2025. China has responded by emphasizing the mutual benefits of U.S. China trade relations and expressed a willingness to negotiate to resolve trade disputes. Trump has also warned the European Union that it might face tariffs unless it increases its purchases of U.S. oil and gas. He argued that the EU needs to reduce its trade deficit with the U.S. by boosting energy purchases, or tariffs on European imports will be enforced. As part of his broader geopolitical ambitions, Trump has shown interest in acquiring Greenland, and has not ruled out using military force to achieve this. In response, Denmark has strengthened its sovereignty over Greenland and reinforced alliances within Europe. Danish Prime Minister Mette Frederiksen has been actively seeking support from European leaders to counter U.S. pressure, emphasizing the importance of European unity in the face of external threats. Frederiksen held discussions with German Chancellor Olaf Scholz and French President Emmanuel Macron, focusing on European cooperation and security. To enhance its defense capabilities in the Arctic, Denmark has committed $2.1 billion in investments to build new Arctic naval vessels, acquire surveillance drones, and improve satellite monitoring systems. Denmark is also working to solidify European support for its control over Greenland, with discussions at an upcoming Brussels Security Summit expected to include the potential deployment of European troops to the region. Greenland's Prime Minister MB Agiti reiterated that while the island is open to increased cooperation with the United States, its residents do not want to become American citizens. He emphasized Greenland's desire for self-determination and independence, stating that the territory belongs to its people. Meanwhile, the European Union is already grappling with the effects of several energy crises, including disruptions caused by the Ukraine conflict, a halt in Russian energy transit, and a ban on gas exports. These challenges have contributed to rising energy prices, public dissatisfaction, and economic instability across the continent. As a result, Trump's proposed additional tariffs on European goods only heighten tensions between the U.S. and the EU, with potential long-term consequences for the EU economy. In response, the EU is taking steps to reduce its dependence on U.S. trade and diversify its global partnerships. A key part of this strategy is a recently signed free trade agreement with Mexico, which strengthens EU-Mexico relations and signals the EU's ability to form significant alliances outside of U.S. influence. Additionally, the EU has secured a landmark trade deal with South American countries, reinforcing its global trade network. These initiatives aim to protect the EU from potential U.S. economic pressures while asserting its role in global trade. The EU's partnerships not only offer economic benefits, but also serve as geopolitical statements of its intent to navigate the challenges posed by a second Trump presidency. The EU and Mexico's modernized trade agreement, finalized on January 17, 2025, seeks to reduce both parties' dependence on the United States, especially in anticipation of potential U.S. tariff hikes. The agreement eliminates high tariffs on various EU exports to Mexico, including agricultural products like cheese, poultry, and wine. This will increase EU agri-food exports to Mexico and provide EU businesses with better access to Mexican government contracts and investments. The agreement also emphasizes enforceable commitments on labor rights and environmental protections. This updated agreement reflects the changing economic landscape and deepens the strategic partnership between the EU and Mexico. However, it still requires ratification by both the EU and Mexican legislatures before it can be fully implemented, a process that may face scrutiny from various stakeholders, including European farmers concerned about increased competition. If you're enjoying this breakdown so far, please hit the like button to help us reach more viewers, and feel free to leave your thoughts or feedback in the comments below. Thanks for watching. Let's dive back into the details. The European Union, EU, and the Mercosur bloc, which includes Argentina, Brazil, Paraguay, and Uruguay, have concluded a major trade agreement after 25 years of negotiations. This deal aims to create one of the world's largest free trade zones, encompassing over 700 million people and nearly 25% of global GDP. Key aspects of the EU-Mercosur trade agreement include tariff reductions. The deal plans to eliminate tariffs on more than 90% of goods traded between the EU and Mercosur countries, which could save EU businesses around $4 billion annually in export duties. Market access. EU industries, such as automobiles and chemicals, will gain enhanced access to Mercosur markets. In return, South American agricultural products like beef and poultry will have increased access to the EU, subject to specific quotas. Sustainability commitments. Both sides have agreed to honor the Paris Agreement on climate change and implement measures to prevent deforestation by 2030. The agreement also includes mechanisms for resolving disputes and ensuring these environmental commitments are met. However, the deal faces resistance. Critics, particularly farmers and environmental groups in the EU, argue that the influx of South American agricultural products could negatively affect European farmers and raise environmental concerns. French President Emmanuel Macron has expressed reservations, calling for additional safeguards and sustainable commitments. Ratification process. For the deal to come into effect, it must be ratified by all 27 EU member states and approved by the European Parliament. Given the opposition, especially from countries with large agricultural sectors, the ratification process could face significant hurdles and may take several years. U.S.-Europe relations. Post-World War II to present. Post-World War II engagements. After World War II, the United States played a key role in rebuilding Europe. The 1948 Marshall Plan provided essential financial aid to stabilize European economies and foster regional cooperation. The U.S. also supported the creation of the European Coal and Steel Community, ECSC, in 1951 to integrate key industries and prevent future conflicts between France and Germany. This laid the groundwork for the European Economic Community, EEC. In 1954, the EU's predecessor opened a delegation in Washington, D.C., to manage growing economic ties, and in 1961, the U.S. established its mission to the European communities in Brussels to strengthen political and economic cooperation. Formation of NATO. As the Cold War intensified, the U.S. led the formation of NATO in 1949, a collective defense pact with Western European countries. The U.S. played a pivotal role by providing military support and stationing troops in Europe, with General Dwight D. Eisenhower appointed as NATO's first supreme commander. The Truman Doctrine and Marshall Plan. In 1947, President Harry S. Truman introduced the Truman Doctrine, offering U.S. support to countries resisting communist influence. This policy was complemented by the Marshall Plan, which aimed to revitalize Europe's economies to prevent the spread of communism. Korean War and Suez Crisis. The Korean War 1950-1953 solidified military cooperation between the U.S. and NATO allies. However, the 1956 Suez Crisis exposed tensions, as the U.S. opposed the UK, France, and Israel's military intervention in Egypt, fearing it would destabilize the region. Berlin Crisis. In 1961, the Berlin Crisis highlighted the Cold War's impact on U.S.-EU relations. The U.S. reaffirmed its commitment to West Berlin and resisted Soviet pressure, demonstrating NATO's role as a stabilizing force in Europe. Vietnam War. During the Vietnam War, 1955-1975, U.S.-European relations were strained. While some European nations supported the U.S., France, in particular, opposed the intervention, reflecting its own colonial history and desire for an independent foreign policy. Economic disagreements. Economic tensions between the U.S. and Europe emerged, especially after the collapse of the Bretton Woods system in the 1970s, leading to exchange rate volatility. In response, the EU established the European Monetary System, EMS, in 1979 to reduce dependence on the US dollar and stabilize European currencies. Reagan era and economic liberalization. During the Reagan administration, the US and EU focused on economic liberalization and free market policies. Despite their shared goals, trade disputes, particularly over agricultural subsidies, arose. Post-Cold War alignment. After the Soviet Union dissolved in 1991, the US and EU realigned their relationship toward greater economic collaboration. In 1990, the Transatlantic Declaration established a framework for dialogue based on shared values like democracy and human rights. The New Transatlantic Agenda, 1995. Launched in 1995, this agenda outlined goals for promoting peace, addressing global challenges, expanding world trade, and fostering cultural exchanges, marking a new phase of EU-US relations. U.S. trade conflicts and economic impact. The ongoing trade conflicts between the U.S. and several nations, including the EU, China, Canada, and Mexico, could have significant economic repercussions. A collective response from these countries could disrupt the U.S. economy, especially in sectors reliant on global supply chains like technology, automotive, and agriculture. Retaliatory tariffs or trade barriers could lead to higher production costs, reduced competitiveness for U.S. businesses, and financial strain on consumers. Countries like China, Canada, and the EU, which are key U.S. trade partners, hold substantial leverage and could shift trade flows elsewhere. This could push the U.S. toward diversification and strategic autonomy while weakening its dominance in global trade. Prolonged trade tensions might reduce the U.S.'s market influence, create a more fragmented global trade system, and harm U.S. businesses dependent on imports. Closing. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed this content or found it insightful, please like the video and subscribe to stay connected. We appreciate your support. Feel free to check out another video on our channel, now on your screen.